Hello everyone, welcome to today's podcast of Green Card Fund India. We are going to discuss the crucial aspects of EB-5 visa application. We have Mr. Girish Patel to our podcast today. Hello Mr. Girish.
Hi Sumita, thank you for having me.
So Girish, let's start with something a lot of people are curious about. What is this EB-5 visa retrogression?
Okay, so retrogression, great subject. So retrogression is the concept where every visa category in the United States has a certain limitation of visas. So for EB5 specifically, there's 10,000 visas that are allocated. And more specifically, each country can only get their 7% allocation. So that's 700 visa for India. Retrogression is when there's so many people that have applied through this visa category that it exceeds that visa allocation. And once that happens, then there's a line, because the government is going to stop processing and make sure that all the visas that have been applied for that have been approved will get their visas before they process new applications.
So there must be a lot of backlog. Is India in backlog right now?
Great question. So India was in a backlog, and this is what matters. You know, in 2022, the U.S. government came out with a new rule. It was called the RIA, the Reform and Integrity Act. And right there and then, at that time, India was already in retrogression. They had a lot of visa backlog. But as part of the new RIA, they actually created new visas at that time. And they've got new classifications of visas. So that has created an opportunity where right now we're open. But for anyone in the past, a lot of them are backlogged still.
So you mean to say there's no waiting right now for the EB-5 visa category?
Absolutely not as of today.
Okay.
This is an important subject because timing really matters in EB-5. And at any given point, there are people filing. We don't know about that. And as they file, the government's going to process those applications. So what we know is that we're very soon into this timeline since the new RIA was introduced. So there's not that many that have been filed and approved. So as of today, right now, there's no backlog.
So the clock is ticking.
But clock is ticking, absolutely.
Okay. So what is this 30th September thing? It's buzz around like, okay, you have to file before 30th September. What is this all about?
Yeah. So the September 30th date is actually the United States Citizens Immigration Service that processes the entire EB-5 program. That is their calendar date. So the 10,000 visas that are the allocation, they end on September 30th. And October 1, brand new set of 10,000 visas. So, I think right now we're in mid-August.
Yeah.
So we're getting very close. And what will happen come October 1st is we'll see. We get to see how many applications were actually filed and processed for that date to know the allocation of visas available.
Okay. So it's the best time to apply right now.
It's absolutely the best time.
Can you elaborate on these set-aside categories? What are these special categories?
So the RIA introduced 3 new categories of visas within the 10,000 quota. So there's 20% set aside specifically for rural-based projects. There's another 10% of total visas that are set aside for projects that are located in target employment areas. And there's a balance of 2% of visas allocated for any projects that are deemed infrastructure. So the goal of the RIA was to set aside visas to attract investment into very certain areas. And so 32% is in the set-asides. As of now, that program did not exist prior to this new RIA. So these are fresh lines for the fresh visas, all current right now. The other balance of 68% is for the traditional way of doing EB-5, and those can also be applied for those historical backlogged investors.
Okay. So what are the implications of these set-aside categories? Indians living in US have any certain set of benefits, or what happens to those Indians who are applying from India or somewhere else? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, it's one of the great benefits of the new RIA is that they've created something called concurrent filing. And the notion of concurrent filing is that if you're already on a visa, and many Indians are already have a visa they're in the United States, or they could go to the United States. So what they can do is, while they're in the United States, they can file for their EB-5 in hopes of a green card, and concurrently adjust their status, apply for their employment benefits, travel permits, whatever they want. And those have been processed in a much quicker order. And effectively, they have all the benefits of being a green card holder, because they can work freely at that point. They can travel freely at that point as well. So there's a benefit that came as part of the program. And as you can see, there are now set aside visa categories that they have more predictability on timing. That goes differently a bit than those investors that are in India, that they don't have the benefit of concurrent filing, right? They're sitting in India, do not have a visa. They need to go through the traditional channel. So it's most important for them to be able to go in now and to go quickly while those visa categories are still current, both rural target employment areas and the infrastructure-based projects.
So is it okay to say that if I follow all these conditions, or say I apply before 30th September, I am also staying in US, I also have a H-1B visa, is it possible for me to get the green card within 2 years?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. What we're seeing, there's even an additional benefit. The RIA came with so many benefits, but one additional one is that they are actually providing some, premium processing for investors that file into a rural-based project. So not only is there a set-aside visa with no line, there's also the ability to get that process quicker. Now, what we do know is there's open visa categories as of today, and what we'll find out is in October 1, very likely they're still open. However, and we talk about the 2-year predictability, right? Right now what we can see is that applications are being processed in a fairly reasonable time. Even consular interviews for those that are living in India are happening at a reasonable time, and these investors are able to get into the United States within this 2-year mark, and it is happening. What we don't know is if we forecast about a year out, call it August or September 2025, by that point, how many applications will have been filed?
Again, retrogression.
Right? So in order to avoid that, you definitely want to take advantage of the timing right now because it's open. We don't want to create a situation where people are getting ready later. At the same time, a lot of people have filed, and all of these set-aside visa categories have hit the line. Once they do, there will be retrogression again, and you will not have predictability of timing anymore.
So how does EB-5 visa work for the H-1Bs working in US?
So we get a lot of calls right now for, we call them investors potentially, but they're immigrants that are sitting there with an H-1B. And the number one reason we get that call is they've heard about concurrent filing. And we ask them their motivation, right? Why do you want to look at the EB-5 program if you're comfortable with your H-1B? It's because they've been at the mercy of their employer, right? At the H-1B, you are stuck to your employer, and they're very nervous about what could happen with being laid off, frankly. And
the layoffs happening. Right?
Absolutely, and they're fearful of it. Because what happens? If you are laid off, you will lose your visa rights, and at that point, you have to go back to your home country. And let's look at what we talked about earlier. If you go back in a year from now, let's say you're laid off in 9 months, and a year from now you've had to go back to your home country, and you say, I need to go back to the United States, and the only visa channel available to you is EB-5. Well, then you're thinking about retrogression again. So they want predictability that they can go right now from being in the United States, working, to then quickly getting their EB-5 applied for, getting their EAD, and having the freedom to continue their own work. So these investors that are sitting in with the H-1B, they don't want to take the chance of going back home. They have families, right? They're set up in great schools. They have a home they purchase. They can't imagine the thought of going back and having to restart their life. So smoothly, they can control their destiny now. They can make their application. They have no line. they can get their employment benefits, start their own business if they want to. But for them, the underlying theme is freedom. They have a freedom to choose, or
do business or open a motel or shop or anything.
Absolutely.
But
And they can, they don't even have to wait for the EB-5 application to be approved. They get to take advantage of all those benefits right now. And again, if they don't, then their consequences are quite high.
So when you see about the set-aside categories, project-based, what are these projects? And does Green Card Fund offer projects, and what are the status of projects, and what kind of projects do you offer?
It's a great question. So for Green Card Fund, we do specialize primarily in hospitality. And in doing so, we've been preparing for these types of moments for a while. It's easy for us to act on them. So in light of that, the three categories, again, that were set-asides have been our focus. The target employment area set-asides, the rural project set-asides, and the infrastructure-based set-asides. So in the way we've done this is that we are currently promoting at any given point at least one target employment area project and one rural project. So an investor can come in right now. They can go into one of our projects that have already been approved per the new conditions with the USCIS. Both projects right now that we have fit both categories. They're already under construction, and potential applicants, even these H-1Bs that are in the United States, can come and take a look. So we're really well positioned right now to meet the set-aside requirements that someone's looking for. Again, while those are available and in action, and I'm sure as things change, we'll be preparing our next project to meet that demand as well.
Okay. So is there any preference to any of these categories, and why?
Yeah, so we have a preference from an economic standpoint, meaning that the first path is to get your immigration benefit, and everybody wants to get that from a predictable standpoint with time. The next part is then a pathway to getting their money back, right? They made this investment. They've done it in order to get their EB-5 immigration. They want to get their money back once all the other immigration work has been completed. And what we find is that, to develop a project, you want to be in a kind of demand market that has a really strong business plan, a strong business value. And so we do focus on both rural that are in very high demand areas, because not every project makes sense to be in a rural location.
Right.
So very, very high demand rural areas, or things that are projects that are in target employment areas that have very strong commercial business. And so those are the two areas that we focus in most.
So we talked about applying on the right time. We talked about what happens if we don't apply on the right time, all the consequences. And now I want to get into it. So I want to start the legal process, and that we'll discuss in the next podcast. So subscribe to our channel of the Green Card Fund India and stay tuned for the next episode. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Girish.
Thank you so much, Sumita.